so welcome back to the channel. Have you ever, thought about this? Why do they get ahead by helping others?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, you see it sometimes and you're like, wait, how did that work? And, you work so hard and put in the hours.
Right.
But still feel stuck.
Yeah.
So are we just not good enough? Or, are we just chasing the wrong kind of success? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, it really makes you think, right? Like, what is the actual path to getting what you want?
Yeah, and that is what we are going to be looking at today.
Yeah.
A deep dive into success, but a different kind of success.
Okay.
Pulling from Adam Grant's Give and Take,
Okay.
Steven Bartlett's The Diary of a CEO, and Kevin D. Johnson's The Entrepreneur Mind.
So 3 really different views of kind of how to achieve things, I guess.
Grant is all about giving.
Okay.
Bartlett is about beliefs and how we communicate.
Okay.
And Johnson is much more strategic.
Right.
About taking the right actions in the right sequence.
Makes sense.
So our mission today is to pull out of these books. What if success isn't about just hustling harder? What if it's more about contribution, alignment, and smart action?
I love that. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Adam Grant, in his book Give and Take, right, he really digs into how helping others actually plays into success. And he kind of breaks it down with these 3 archetypes: givers, takers, and matchers. Can you remind us about the differences between those 3?
Yeah, I mean, imagine like a spectrum of how we interact with the world.
Right.
Takers, they're all about what can I get from you? My needs are first and foremost.
Okay.
Matchers, they want fairness. It's like, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine, quid pro quo.
Okay.
And then there are givers. They just genuinely want to contribute. They don't always necessarily need something tangible back.
So it's interesting because Grant actually found that initially givers can actually end up at the bottom.
Yeah.
Which is really surprising. Can you talk about some of the examples he gives of that?
Yeah. So think about those medical students he talks about. The ones that said they love helping others, they actually had the lowest grades.
Interesting.
It's like they were giving so much that they weren't studying enough.
Right.
And then in sales, the salespeople who were givers actually had lower revenue because they were so focused on the customer, they weren't good at closing. So it's like this pure selflessness without any boundaries can backfire.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And that's where this distinction between selfless givers and what he calls other-ish givers comes in.
Yeah.
What makes an other-ish giver different?
So an other-ish giver is still generous, but they're also mindful of their own well-being, their own goals. They know they can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
Like take David Hornick, this venture capitalist, super generous guy. He helps competitors even.
Wow.
But he's still incredibly successful. So it's not about being selfless, it's about this sustainable giving.
And that kind of giving actually leads to a stronger network. Adam Rifkin's story in the book is a great example of this, right?
Yes. So Rifkin did all these small acts of kindness over years and years for just tons of people. It wasn't transactional at all.
Yeah.
But what he did is he built this amazingly powerful network. He was investing in people, not collecting contacts.
And so when he needed something, people were there.
Yeah, they were there for him. And it's interesting, too, because you would think, helping others takes away from your own work.
Yeah.
But there was this study of engineers. The most productive engineers, they were often the ones that were also helping their colleagues.
Interesting.
So by being a giver, they fostered this culture of trust and collaboration, right?
Right.
And then they could draw on this wider range of expertise when they had a problem.
I like that. That kind of speaks to this idea of expedition behavior, right?
Yeah.
Where focusing on the group's success is what lifts everyone up.
Yeah, and George Meyer, the comedy writer, he worked on all those iconic shows. He would dedicate his time to helping on these less glamorous parts of the project.
Okay.
Like he would help the guest writers.
Okay.
So he was focused on the overall quality, not just his individual contributions.
Right.
And that earned him huge respect.
Yeah.
And it made him a much more valuable collaborator.
And it's amazing how this type of giving can actually be energizing. It gives you that sense of meaning and purpose.
Yeah, it's not a drain.
Right.
It fills you up.
Yeah.
And there's research showing that charitable giving is actually linked to a higher income.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So helping others might actually make you more successful in other areas of your life.
But like you build this reserve of positive energy.
Yeah, exactly.
But, one thing that givers have to watch out for is that doormat effect.
Yeah.
Where they end up being taken advantage of. Grant shares those stories of Lillian Bauer's promotion that got delayed and Peter Audit, who is really just getting exploited. So how can givers protect themselves from that?
Well, they have to be smart about it.
Yeah.
Grant talks about something called sincerity screening. You really pay attention to people's actions, not just their words.
Right.
And then there's this idea of generous tit for tat. You're willing to help those who also help others, but you're careful with those that are always taking.
Okay, so setting those boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, advocating for others like Samir did when he was negotiating his salary for his family.
Oh, yeah.
That's another good strategy.
Yes, it's like shifting the focus away from personal gain to supporting others.
Uh-huh.
And then perspective taking, right?
Yeah.
Really understanding the other person's needs.
Okay.
Which can lead to more win-win outcomes.
And then he talks about this uncommon commonality effect.
Yeah, the tendency to help people who share those weird small similarities with us.
I love that Kiva microloan study, right?
Yes. People were more likely to lend money to those who shared their initials.
Craze.
Or had the same occupation. And then there's the one about people with rare fingerprints.
Oh, yeah.
They got more help. So these little connections can really sway us.
Yeah, and then he talks about the reciprocity ring, which is a more formal way of helping people.
Yeah, it's like a structured way for a group to give and receive help. So it's more intentional.
So it seems like the big takeaway from Give and Take is that generosity can lead to success, but you got to be strategic about it.
Totally.
Be mindful and protect yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to Steven Bartlett and his book, The Diary of a CEO.
Okay.
Now, he digs into how important alignment is, especially the role our beliefs play in success. And he says we don't actually choose our initial beliefs.
Yeah.
But they can be changed. What does he mean by that?
So he thinks our beliefs are shaped by our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence we've gathered throughout our lives.
Right.
But they're not set in stone. When we see new convincing evidence, especially if it supports what we want to believe, our beliefs can change.
So it's like we can update our operating system.
Exactly.
I like that.
And positive outcomes are especially powerful.
Okay.
Like if we see something good happen as a result of a certain belief, we're more likely to hold on to that belief.
And then he talks about the question behavior effect, which I find fascinating.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So instead of telling someone what to do or who to be, you ask questions that make them affirm the desired behavior or trait.
Okay.
So like instead of saying you need to be more organized, you could say, is being organized important to you?
Right.
And if they say yes, they're more likely to actually act in an organized way.
So it's like planting the seed.
Exactly. It taps into their desire to be consistent with what they've said.
And then he introduces this idea of a self-story and how it affects our goals.
Yes, this is huge. Our self-story is that narrative we create about who we are,
Okay.
what we can do, where we fit in the world.
Right.
And Bartlett says that a positive self-story is crucial for overcoming challenges.
Okay, so like we need a good story to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. He gives this example of Chris Eubank Jr. pushing through that intense training pain
Yeah.
because his self-story is that he's someone who doesn't give up.
Wow, so that's what fuels him.
Yeah.
And this connects back to that feeling of being stuck.
Right.
Bartlett suggests it's not that we're not trying hard enough.
Right.
Maybe we're just misaligned with our own self-story.
Exactly. If what you're doing doesn't fit with who you believe you are, it's going to be a constant uphill battle.
It's draining.
Yeah, totally. It's like there's this internal conflict.
He also mentions psychological moonshots.
Yeah.
Small changes that can really shift how we see things.
Yeah, it's about changing the perception, not necessarily the thing itself.
Right.
Like when Uber asked, what if you can request a ride on your phone? It wasn't a huge technological change at first, but it completely changed how we saw getting a ride. It made it seem so much easier.
And in terms of finding that right fit, he talks about the Goldilocks effect.
Yeah, when people have three options, they tend to pick the middle one.
Right.
Too much, not too little, just right. Okay. Like when he was house hunting, he was shown 3 houses and picked the one in the middle.
Interesting.
It's like you can use this when you're negotiating or even designing products.
Yeah.
Offer a range of options, and you can subtly guide people towards the choice that you think is best.
And to make a big impact, he talks about fighting for the first 5 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Those first few seconds are everything.
Why are they so important?
Attention spans are so short these days.
Right.
You have to grab people's attention immediately, whether it's a presentation, an email, or even just a first impression. You have to get straight to the point.
Make them want to hear more.
Exactly.
He also brings up the Kaizen philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
This idea of continuous small improvements.
Yeah, Kaizen is all about consistent progress.
Yeah.
You make these tiny changes over time, and they build up. It's about getting a little bit better each day. It's not about trying to change everything at once.
And a really interesting technique is the pre-mortem method, which is like planning for failure in a way.
Yeah, so instead of analyzing what went wrong after a project fails, you imagine that the project has already failed.
Okay.
And then you brainstorm all the reasons why it might have happened.
Interesting.
It forces you to think critically and anticipate potential problems.
So you can avoid them.
Exactly.
And finally, he connects time allocation to success.
Yeah, this is so crucial.
Yeah.
Time is our most valuable resource.
It really is.
And how we spend our time determines what we achieve.
Are we spending it on the right things?
Exactly. Are we scheduling our priorities or just prioritizing what's on our schedule?
So the diary of a CEO is really about examining ourselves, our beliefs, and taking action with intention.
Yes, it's about being aligned internally and communicating effectively.
Okay, let's move on to Kevin D. Johnson's The Entrepreneur Mind. He brings a more external perspective.
Right.
And he argues that entrepreneurship is not just about talent, it's also about sequence.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
So he says that timing is everything.
Okay.
The order in which you do things, your sense of urgency, that's what makes the difference.
Yeah.
He talks about his own experience launching a college web portal. And it was just too late.
Right.
He missed the market window.
Yeah.
But with Omni Publisher, his online content management system, he acted much faster, and it was a success.
So he learned from his mistake.
He did. And he really emphasizes the importance of prioritizing your business. He uses the airplane oxygen mask analogy.
Right. Take care of yourself first so you can help others.
Exactly. If your business fails, you can't help anyone.
It's about sustainability.
Yeah. And he quotes Stephen Covey, who said, "The key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities."
I love that quote.
It's about being intentional with your time and focusing on what really matters.
And Johnson also talks about the practical stuff, like protecting your intellectual property and being picky about your customers.
Yeah, those things are so important.
Yeah.
Protecting your IP is about safeguarding your unique value. You don't want others stealing your ideas.
Right.
And being selective about your customers, it saves you so much hassle.
Okay.
Bad customers can drain your energy and hurt your reputation.
It's about protecting your business. Exactly. And interestingly, he argues that a bad economy can be a good thing for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive.
It does.
But he says that big companies become more risk-averse in a downturn.
Okay.
So it creates opportunities for startups to be nimble and innovative.
To fill the gaps.
Yeah. And there's less competition for talent and resources.
That's just...
It's like never let a good crisis go to waste, right?
Right.
And of course, technology is changing everything.
Yeah.
He says entrepreneurs need to stay on top of new technologies.
Right.
Be adaptable. You can't ignore the changes or you'll get left behind.
And building a great team is key.
Oh, yeah. Your team is everything.
Yeah.
You need talented people who believe in your vision.
And who can work together.
Yes. Internal conflicts can destroy a business.
He also warns against underestimating the competition.
Yeah, even if you think you're in a brand new market, you're still competing for people's attention and money.
Right.
You have to analyze your competitors and be aware of potential threats.
So always be looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, basically.
Continuous self-education is a big theme for him.
Yeah, he says entrepreneurship is all about learning. You have to keep reading, studying, going to events.
To stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. The world is changing so fast.
And surrounding yourself with smart people is important.
Yeah, even if it's intimidating.
Right.
Being around people who are smarter than you makes you better.
It pushes you to grow.
Yeah.
And he has some interesting advice about office space.
Yeah, he says it's a luxury, not a necessity. Especially early on. You need to focus your resources on things that directly contribute to growth.
Like marketing and product development.
Exactly.
And even as an entrepreneur, you still have a boss.
Yeah, the customer.
Right.
You have to stay focused on their needs.
Because they're the ones who are ultimately paying the bills.
Exactly.
He also encourages entrepreneurs to talk about their businesses all the time.
Yeah, it's about visibility.
Right.
You never know who you might meet or who might be interested in what you're doing.
You have to spread the word.
Yeah. And offering help to others, even if you don't expect anything in return, is so important.
Like we saw in Give and Take.
Exactly. It's about building goodwill and creating a network of people who want to support you.
And he says, don't hold grudges.
Yeah, let go of the negativity. It just weighs you down.
Focus on the future.
Exactly.
He concludes by talking about how successful entrepreneurs are often mavericks.
Yeah, they're not afraid to challenge the status quo. They think differently.
So, The Entrepreneur Mind is a really practical guide to building a successful business.
It's about strategy, resourcefulness, and focusing on the customer.
So what are your biggest takeaways from all three of these books?
Well, for me, it's that success isn't just about one thing.
Okay.
It's not just about talent or hard work.
It's more nuanced than that.
It is. Give and Take showed us that helping others can actually make us more successful.
Right.
But we have to be smart about it.
Strategic?
Yes. And then The Diary of a CEO highlighted how important our beliefs are. And how being aligned with those beliefs can help us achieve our goals.
And communicating effectively.
Yes, absolutely. And then The Entrepreneur Mind gave us that practical, action-oriented perspective.
It's about taking the right steps in the right order.
Yeah, and focusing on what really matters.
So instead of just hustling harder, we should think about how we can contribute to others.
Yes.
Make sure our actions are aligned with our beliefs.
And be strategic about how we move forward.
So for you, the listener, what's one small change you can make today to approach your goals differently?
Yeah, how can you apply these ideas to your own life?
That's something to think about.
It is. And that wraps up our deep dive for today.
Great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And if you enjoyed this exploration of unconventional success, don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more deep dives into ideas that challenge the norm. Until next time, keep exploring what matters most to you.
See you next time.